It's not often you get a runaway hit series quite as prevalent as Squid Game. While trying to understand why it became such a phenomenon is an exercise in madness, part of it may have come from the show's heavy inspiration from manga and anime. Writer Hwang Dong-hyuk spent much of his time during the writing process reading various survival manga such as Battle Royale and Liar Game. Therefore, if you liked Squid Game, it stands to reason that there would be a lot of anime that would appeal to you as well. So if you happen to be in the market for another bingeable series to tide you over during your Squid Game-induced schizophrenia, here are our picks for shows you might want to check out. I'm Caleb with Otaku Binge, and this is Top 10 Anime to Watch if you like Squid Game. But first, let's quickly summarize Squid Game to get a more concrete idea of what we're looking for in our anime. A group of people are forced to play a series of games in which they must put their lives on the line in exchange for a large reward. These players come from various walks of life but are down on their luck in some way and need the games in order to survive, so they willingly subject themselves to the deadly games. Additionally, the games as a whole are created for the amusement of another outside party who serves as a tangible reminder of the vast disparity between the two classes. However, they're also meant as a social experiment in order to see if there was any good left in humanity by seeing if the people driven to desperation would be able to choose the right thing when given the chance. If an anime would fit many of these themes or fits a handful particularly strong, then they will land higher on this list. Furthermore, we usually don't bother worrying about spoilers much on this channel since we assume everyone has seen the source material. However, with a format like this where we're giving out recommendations, we have to be a bit more careful with them here, so we will be avoiding them as much as possible. With that out of the way, let's get into our ranking. Our number 10 spot goes to the newest anime on this list, 2021's Highrise Invasion. For the most part, we could name just about any isekai anime and get a passing grade, but we wanted to at least stick to the theme to some extent. In this case, Highrise Invasion follows the story of Yuri Hanjo as she is suddenly transported to a world filled with skyscrapers with various suspension bridges connecting them. She then finds herself being haunted by several masked figures simply called masks who are former humans that are being controlled by someone. Throughout her adventure, she finds other teenagers who have been transported to this world, befriending some and battling others, all the while looking for her brother Rika and trying to find the secrets to this world and why they were taken here. While we can't say much for the sake of spoilers, the world of Highrise Invasion bears a lot of resemblance to that of Squid Game. The characters have to learn to adapt to their harsh environment they find themselves in, use the resources at their disposal, and adopt a kill or be killed methodology in order to survive. The character development is especially strong, with the lead characters of Yuri and Mayuko being particular standouts. However, none of these characters hold a candle to the in-depth backstory and development of Sniper Mask, whose popularity among fans serves as the linchpin of the entire series, as he not only steals the show on his own, but his character growth is tied so heavily to the main plot that he has some sort of connection to just about everything within it. Speaking of which, the concept of the mask, Sniper Mask included, is one that is intriguing and has a lot of strong development and plot twists to keep it engaging throughout. That being said, there are some flaws with this series as well. As we mentioned at the start, this is basically just a step above any generic isekai anime in terms of similarity to Squid Game, meaning you would only get a bit more out of this one over something like Akusan Online. Speaking of which, the fan service in this show can be a bit excessive, particularly when it isn't strongly justified in the darker environment. Additionally, this anime also suffers from what we like to call the Goblin Slayer effect. This is when an anime relies so heavily on shock factor to hook their audience that they up the brutality of the first episode by about 15,000% in a way that no other episode is able to replicate, and also alienates potential viewers that would otherwise enjoy the series. In this case, the body count of the first episode outclasses that of every other episode in terms of number, gore and brutality, and they even managed to include a scene of attempted sexual assault as well, which is important to note if that is a potential trigger for you. Still, it should be noted that the Goblin Slayer effect is somewhat lessened if you know about it going in, so if you're able to get over the hurdle of the first episode, then this should be an enjoyable watch for you. Just be sure to avoid the English dub at all costs because the writing on this one is absolutely ridiculous. For number 9, we have the longest name on our list, Problem Children Are Coming From Another World, Aren't They? From 2013. This one is arguably the most lighthearted entry on this list, which is either a good thing or a bad thing depending on your preferences. This anime, called mondaji for short, follows the three teenagers Izuyoi, Azuka, and Yo, who find themselves summoned to the world of a little garden by a cute bunny girl named Black Rabbit. In this world, people have access to various supernatural powers called gifts and use these abilities to gamble in high-stakes gift games in order to obtain wealth and prestige. Black Rabbit, who comes from a nameless community which has fallen from grace, enlists these three to help them reclaim their lost glory while helping bring down the tyrannical demon lords presiding over Little Garden.
Is it a challenge you imbecilic humans desire?
This is the first entry to introduce the concept of games to the story, something which will be a reoccurring theme for the rest of the list. Much like Squid Game, these games are deadly all-or-nothing gambits which offer the participants the chance to rise above their status or lose everything. While the games in mondaji tend to be more combat-oriented, they at least make sure to add a specific handicap or win condition that makes it more interesting. Additionally, the characters manage to be genuinely compelling due to not being so overpowered that they are immune to character development. Azuka in particular has the most developed character arc among them, coming to terms with being the weakest of her group and striving to better herself because of it. Additionally, Black Rabbit proves to be the most intriguing character in the show, as her position as a judge master requires her to be impartial, yet the story forces her to choose a side regardless. Still, that does bring up the point where the characters are severely overpowered for the world they find themselves in. Not only that, they are overpowered from the start, which does take away a lot of the suspense from the story. Izuyoi is the worst offender of the bunch by far, with him basically being a one-punch man in both ability and character. Furthermore, most characters outside of the main group are somewhat bland and underutilized, which can leave the story wanting when it does focus on them. However, the main cast is still interesting enough to carry this series, so if you're in the mood for something lighter, this one might be for you. For number 8, we have Ganz from 2004. This one is sort of an isekai anime and sort of not at the same time. Ganz begins with the lead characters, high school students Karuno and Kato, getting hit by a subway train and dying. After their deaths, however, they find themselves before a large black sphere known as Ganz, which tasks them to find and kill the targets it gives them in a first-person shooter video game-like experience. These targets are almost always aliens of varying forms that are invisible to the general public, as are the players themselves, and each alien killed by the players earns said player points, which can be used to return them to their normal lives, gain special power-ups, or even revive a player who was killed in a previous mission. While the video game world is nothing new to anime, Ganz takes a slightly different approach by applying video game logic to the real world. This lets the series enjoy a more grounded setting while still offering the high fantasy adventure that video game insert stories offer to the viewer. What's more, the fact that the players in this game have the option to leave at any time once they have at least 100 points gives them a sense of empowerment that is very reminiscent to Squid Game. No matter how hard the battles get or how many of their friends die, these characters choose to subject themselves to the danger and they stick to it. That being said, the realism takes away a lot more than it adds with its similarity to Squid Game. Since the gamified part of the story is simply combat, there are plenty of times where it doesn't feel like a game. If you are looking for a show which implemented the game show elements that Squid Game employed, this one probably won't do it for you. Additionally, the characters in the show tend to fall more on the cookie-cutter side of things, though that may be more of a product of its time rather than the fault of the series itself. Overall, it's a bit lacking, but if you like alien shoot-em-ups, this one might be the one for you. Number 7 goes to the oldest entry on our list, 1998's Yu-Gi-Oh! Not to be confused with the early 2000s remake known as Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters in Japan, Season 0 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a more faithful retelling of the original manga. To elaborate on what most of you are already aware of, Yu-Gi-Oh! Follows the story of Yugi Muto, who after solving the Millennium Puzzle awakens the ancient and dark spirit who dwells within. This gives him not only a more aggressive and confident alter ego, but also the ability to harness the shadow games which he uses to punish bullies and evildoers alike. Where this differs from Duel Monsters is the darker theme of the show, along with a decidedly smaller focus on the card game of Duel Monsters, which allows for a wider variety of games to be utilized throughout the series. While this is a bit more episodic than Squid Games, the utilization of simple children's games in a life-or-death struggle is basically a dead ringer. The Shadow Games manage to give a sense of karmic justice to each episode, as they are not only tailor-made to the villain of the day, but are also foreshadowed in some way at the beginning of every episode. Additionally, if you're a fan of the Duel Monsters anime, then the darker tone of the show would be an interesting experiment, especially if you only saw the squeaky clean 4Kids version, which is already censored to high heaven. If you want a Yu-Gi-Oh experience that's a bit edgier, then this one might be a bit better than card games on motorcycles. However, if you're looking for a Squid Game alternative, then there's a few things lacking here. The lack of a narrative structure to this series leaves a lot to be desired, as this is the only entry on this list that would technically fall under the category of slice of life. Without an overachieving plot that lasts more than a handful of episodes, most of the intrigue that came with the story of Squid Game is lost in this series. Additionally, this series shows these characters at their worst, as a lot of the side characters have some major character flaws that were edited out in Duel Monsters. Anzu in particular is especially bad, as a lot of her character development in this series shows her regressing in likability during the story, though that's more of a topic for when we make Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0 Good to Evil video in the future. Still, if you came for the games, then the Shadow Games of Season 0 should be more than enough to satisfy you. For number 6, we're going with No Game No Life from 2014. Speaking of games, this is one that has them in spades. No Game No Life follows Sora and Shiro, a pair of shut-in siblings who make up the ultimate gaming duo Blank, who find themselves summoned to the world of Disboard by the god of play, Ted. In this world, everyone within must abide by the 10 pledges, a series of immutable and absolute rules that dictate that any and all conflict must be solved through the use of games.
If you're gonna lie, you better be careful who you do it to.
Determined to keep their reputation as unbeatable gamers, Sora and Shiro decide to use this opportunity to challenge Tet for the right to be the god of Disboard. For the purpose of this list, this is basically an improved version of mondaji, as it shares many of the same strengths and weaknesses of that series, but with marked improvements. In terms of games, this one has the most variety on this list. The 10 pledges offer a unique experience that's open to interpretation, and this series takes full advantage of this by adapting the fantasy elements to simple games. This allows for unique twists, such as turning a game of word chain to an epic battle to the death, or a game of renegade that chips away at the player's very existence. Additionally, the characters are also one of the strong points of this anime, as each one manages to be just as interesting as the last. Sora and Shiro in particular do a good job of balancing their overpowered main character status with their flawed lifestyles, character growth, and interesting strategy. It's not whether they'll win that makes things interesting, but how they'll win. Still, they're overpowered right out of the box, and like its sister series, it does take away some tension from the story. It handles the situation decidedly better, as we just mentioned, but you still go into it knowing that the heroes are going to win. What's more, we also have to bring up the fan service again, as it is a bit excessive in this one, especially as it pertains to the underage characters Shiro and Izuna. Whether or not this is a deal breaker, it is still something that you have to come to terms with if you want to watch this one. However, if you can get past this, then you'll have a fun and intriguing story with plenty of games to keep you guessing. Number 5 is going to be a short one with Dangarampa, the animation, from 2013. This one, you're just gonna have to take our word for it if you haven't seen it already. Danganronpa, the animation, follows the same plot as the video game Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, though that doesn't have much of an impact on the story itself, resembling a game. The series follows Makoto Neigi, who, along with 15 other gifted students, finds himself trapped suddenly within their high school Hope's Peak Academy. They are then told by the anthropomorphic bear Monokuma that the only way they can escape this school is if they murder another student and get away with it following a subsequent trial. That may not sound too much like Squid Games on the surface, and you'd be 100% correct in thinking that. We unfortunately can't go into the similarities here, since they all pertain to major plot twists and secrets that don't get revealed until the very end. If you've seen this before or played the original game it's based on, then you know what we're talking about. Regardless, the fact that this prevents us from discussing Squid Game means that everything that pertains to it is safe for the very end, meaning that we can't place this one too high on its own merits. However, if you do make it to the end, you can take our word for it that the similarities between the two are disturbingly on point. At the very least, we can mention that the execution scenes are well done enough on their own to warrant giving it a chance. We all knew this one was coming. Number 4 goes to 2012's Sword Art Online. We're sure that a lot of you expected this to be higher, and if that isn't a glowing endorsement of our top 3, we don't know what is. For all 2 of you unaware, this anime follows the story of Kazuto Kirigai, who goes by the moniker Kirito, who ends up trapped alongside 10,000 other players in the MMORPG appropriately named Sword Art Online. Both the game and the VR hardware used to enter the game were developed by Akiko Kayaba, who gives the players the task of beating all 100 floors of the game in order to escape, with the caveat that any player who dies in the game or attempts to remove the headgear out of the game will suffer death in real life.
Players, I wish you the best of luck.
There are other seasons with their own plots and development, but for the purpose of this list, all of them are either inferior to or in relation to the first season, so that's what we'll be focusing on. To get the obvious out of the way first, the concept of being trapped in a video game where one wrong move will cost the player their lives is very close to the situation in Squid Game. Unlike Ganz, which takes a more realistic approach to the setting, Sword Art Online embraces the video game setting wholeheartedly, making even the most intense and dangerous moments feel like a game through and through. Beyond that, there's actually a lot more to the connection to Squid Games than this, most of which revolves around the main antagonist. The parallels between Kayaba and Ilnam are uncanny to say the least. Both of them are wealthy entrepreneurs who end up trapping countless people into playing their games for their own amusement. However, they are not above participating in their own game, putting their own life on the line in order to experience what their players are going through for themselves. Additionally, they manage to actually care about their players, which, when contrasted with their willingness to kill hundreds, makes them out to be notably more sociopathic. That being said, there are a few issues. For one thing, this is one of the most popular anime series of all time, meaning that it's highly unlikely you haven't heard of this one before. That alone is enough for us to keep this from placing within our top 3. Additionally, the characters in this series aren't the strongest, with many of them subject to flanderization and regressive character development. The female leads are especially susceptible to this, with otherwise strong, independent characters being reduced to damsels in distress for the purpose of selling the harem aspect that they ruined for themselves halfway through the first season. Furthermore, Kiro himself is yet another case of an overpowered character removing tension in the series, though at the very least, he doesn't start out as one, so there's a bit of development. Still, for all the similarities that this one has, we can't in good faith place this one any lower than this. Entering our top 3, we have 2011's Dead Man Wonderland. Arguably the darkest entry on this list, Dead Man Wonderland follows Ganta Igarashi as his entire class is slaughtered before his eyes by a random stranger and he is framed for their murder. Already off to a pleasant start. He is then sentenced to death and taken to Dead Man Wonderland, a hybrid high-security prison amusement park where prisoners must perform for an unsuspecting public in a series of deadly game show-like obstacle courses and gladiator-style fights to the death. While struggling to survive, Ganta befriends those he manages to defeat while also working to uncover the secrets of Dead Man Wonderland and find the Red Man who killed his friends. If you're somehow wondering how Dead Man Wonderland compares to Squid Game, one look at how the Dead Man Wonderland facility operates should make it painfully clear. From the perspective of the general public, Dead Man Wonderland is a massive theme park facility run by the prison population.
Are they getting off watching us die?
The danger involved in the cruel games of survival is completely lost on the tourists who are unaware that any maiming or loss of life is not an act. And that's just what's on the surface. The prison guards have full autonomy over the prisoners and are encouraged to treat them as cruelly as they wish. Each prisoner is also fitted with a collar which functions as a monitor, stunner, and for the inmates on death row, a continuous injection of lethal poison which requires the regular consumption of a special antidote in order to keep in check. And don't even get us started on the brutal and sadistic carnival corpse where the wealthy get to watch bloody death matches between the facility's dead men in secret. All this adds up to make the astronomical gap in power between the inmates, facility, and general public painstakingly obvious and absolutely terrifying. As far as negatives go, there's not a whole lot we can say here. This is another anime which suffers from the Goblin Slayer effect, since while the series is cruel and sadistic throughout, nothing compares to the absolute bloodbath of the first episode in terms of gore and brutality. It isn't nearly as bad as Highrise Invasion, and there's at least some truth in advertising, so it's not too egregious. The side characters are also pretty weak across the board, though the main cast is developed enough to make the overall average to be tolerable. Other than that, we we'd be grasping at straws to come up with negatives, so if you liked Squid Game, you'll probably like this one as well. Our penultimate slot goes to Darwin Game from 2020. As you may have surmised from our previous entry, we're running out of negative things to say about these last two, so we'll just stick with the positives. And if you're looking for Squid Game content, Darwin's Game is one that you'll be sure to love. The series follows Kaname Sudo, who accepts an invitation from a friend to play a mobile game called Darwin's Game. However, he quickly finds out that the game is a cruel real-life survival game that pits players against each other in death matches in order to obtain points which can be used as currency both in-game and in real life. The game also gives each player a unique superhuman ability known as a sigil. Kaname's sigil, for example, allows him to recreate and modify weapons and other tools he's touched before. Trapped in a game of relentless killing and conquest, Kaname resolves to clear the game by seeking out and killing the game master who created it. Whereas Ganz skirted the line of video games and SOA embraced it head-on, Darwin's Game manages to find a perfect medium, making it feel like a game while keeping it realistic enough to have the feeling of danger close present throughout. This delicate balance matches both the tension and the gamified elements of Squid Game almost perfectly, allowing it to enjoy the best of both worlds. Additionally, we also have to bring up the Game Master and the obvious parallels he shares with key characters in Squid Game, being a sort of an amalgamation of the frontman, the VIPs, and the guards all in one. Despite being an unseen character for the entire series, he is a constant and looming presence, serving as the strongest driving presence in the series as both the antagonist and the motivation for the main characters. Overall, this is pretty much a dead ringer for Squid Game right down to the name of the show, so we would definitely recommend this one for all of your dramatic death game needs, second only to our number 1 pick. Our final entry on our list goes to 2012's A Cell World. This one follows the story of Haruyuki Arita, a boy who is frequently bullied and ridiculed and often spends his time playing games in virtual reality alone. Eventually, his innate skills attract the attention of Koro Ukihime, the popular, intellectual, highly attractive student council vice president who introduced Haru to Brainburst, a secret program that is able to accelerate the human cognitive process to the point where time seems to slow down. In addition to this, Brainburst also functions as an augmented reality MMO fighting game where players fight in a fierce duel in order to obtain burst points which can be used to access the acceleration abilities in the real world. Koro Ukihime then enlists Haru into joining her and reaching level 10 within Brainburst in order to ultimately meet the creator of the program and find out the true purpose of it. Compared to the last entry, A Cell World is darn near identical to Darwin's Game. Both involve the players battling out in dangerous situations in order to obtain benefits to improve their lives in the real world. The main characters endure numerous hardships in the game in order to reach the end of the game in order to find the creator and find out why the game is made in the first place. So, what was it that edged A Cell World that much closer to Squid Game? Well, it's simple. The players in Brainburst are doing so fully on their own volition. They're not trapped in the game, they're not being forced to play the game, there aren't even any consequences for not playing it. There are multiple characters in the series who end up quitting the game for one reason or another, and there are no major consequences for them. Despite this, they choose to subject themselves to the dangers of Brainburst purely for their own personal gain, which speaks much more strongly to the players of Squid Game. And this anime's placement is really that simple. Darwin's Game is one of the closest series to Squid Game, and A Cell World manages to one-up it in one area while matching it point for point in every other. For that reason, we have to list A Cell World as the number 1 anime to watch if you liked Squid Game. Alright, that's our list, but what do you think? Did we miss any shows you feel should have been on our list? Let us know down below. Oh, and be sure to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist where we break down the morality of characters in your favorite anime. But most importantly, stay wicked.